It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Duts. I'm your host, Mains, and my colleague in the Danger Zone and Rainford is Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
Very well indeed.
Back once again, like a renegade master. D4 damage in the ill behaviour.
Yes, we have angered some people for our apparent
two of them.
silence in May, yes.
Your lad holidays, right?
Yeah, but then he went, and expressed his displeasure in a tweet that Scott Fish was copied into, and there are a few people in fantasy that you don't really want thinking ill of you, and Scott is one of them.
True. So we are back this week. Neil had the privilege to speak to Andy Behrens, who we will play later on in the show. As always, Neil plucked up the courage to get a new guest on and put it in a particular time where I couldn't make it. At some point, this will stop being a massive coincidence.
Will it?
No. We will also start a first round mock draft for me and Neil, fantasy style. We're going to do one at the beginning of the off-season, i.e. now, and one at the end of the off-season, compare and contrast. We've already done our random number generator heads and tails, and Neil won. So Neil will be first pick in our 12
we'll stress,
draft.
That's it. I'll stress as we go on, we are picking for 12 different teams, as it were. So it's not like I get 6 of these players and Mains gets 6. We're looking that, Neil picks first, then Paul, then Dutton picks third, then Mannering, then, Dutts, then Mains. So think of it as 12 separate entities.
Correct.
And it's in PPR, obviously.
Yeah, which we'll come on to later in Andy Behrens' part of the show, but he's on the good side of the aisle. Neil, it's the off-season, we'd usually do Weird World, but given a lot of our news usually comes from America, and we got sickening news again from Texas this week, I didn't think it was totally appropriate to do Weird World, especially as the majority of them stories come from America. It's very difficult as someone who's from the UK to comprehend the kind of things that go on in America, in schools, or just across the country on a daily basis. All I would ask is, if there are people from America listening, is have a think about why you are the only country in the world where this seems to happen on a regular basis, and try and think what you could do to stop that being the case. It'd be very easy for me to go into a mass rant. I'm not going to. It's not really appropriate. It continued today as one of the men who was killed, his wife, passed away of a heart attack today, leaving multiple kids. It's tremendously sad and horrific news, and I hope we are another step closer to dealing with it in a better way. Unfortunately, I'm not 100% sure we are, based on the interview I saw between Sky News and Ted Cruz. But I guess we will find out, and I hope, as always, that I am very wrong and the world is better than me and Neil expect it to be.
I have nothing to add.
I didn't think you did. So let's move on and let's get on to our first round mock draft. So Neil, you decided that we needed to do a way too early first round mock, 12 team PPR. What we'd look at doing is do this at the start of the year, and do it at the start of the off season, and do it at the end of the off season, and see where the chips lay, see if anything's changed, and see if anything hasn't. As we said, already done the coin toss. Neil picked heads. It was videoed, live streamed, so to speak, and heads was the call. So, in your face, tails never fails, losers. So Neil gets to pick first. So, Neil, without further ado, please give me your first pick in the Mains and Duts mock draft. As you said, PPR.
I don't think it's going to be much of a surprise, and I don't think it'll be a surprise in countless drafts across the world. But the first player getting picked, especially in PPR, is Jonathan Taylor, running back of the Indianapolis Colts.
Is the only way this doesn't happen is an injury occurs?
Yeah, unless he injures himself in OTAs, training camp. I mean, our draft, I know our main draft, is scheduled for the 4th of September. So that's pretty much, the seat will draft and then the season starts.
Yeah.
So assuming most people won't draft that late, but probably be around that ballpark, the only way I can see Jonathan Taylor not being first in fantasy drafts is if he gets hurt, as everything is there for him to smash. The circumstances are better. He plays for, I think, arguably the best team in his division. He now has a quarterback with a proven track record of checking down to the running backs and not just on third or obvious passing situations. So he's going to get the few receptions bump, and it's not as if he wasn't catching balls last year either, and that was with Carson Wentz, who doesn't throw to running backs. So I just don't think, I don't think there's any argument you can make that makes me not want to take Jonathan Taylor first.
Love it, Neil, love it. I'm second pick, which I think for the first time in what feels like a long time is a interesting position to be in. I think there's a definite one at the moment, and if you look around websites and average draft positions right now and kind of stuff, it's not a consensus at all. I am going to pick Austin Eckler, LA Chargers running back. I know you're high on him. The Chargers offense has a chance to be special, and if you get an opportunity to get a player who's going to have a lot of volume and a lot of play in that, I think you should. And let's be honest, Liz Loza, friend of the show, is friends with Austin Eckler. That's good enough for me.
It's an offense that you're going to want to invest in multiple at multiple spots. You're going to want Austin Eckler, you're going to want Mike Williams, you're going to want Keenan Allen, probably is going to be the bargain, I think, of that trio. And then, especially in one quarterback leagues, you're probably going to be enticed by Justin Herbert. It's an offense that plays fast. They pass the ball a ton. Austin Eckler, as we know, is one of the best receiving backs in the NFL. It all lines up that fantasy gold is going to come from this particular seam, as it were. So I have no issue with taking Eckler this high. People might be worried that they've drafted Isaiah Spiller. Spiller is, he may as well be Isaiah Speller, because he's in there to spell Eckler, not take work from him, not take this serious work, not the receptions, not the red zone touches. So no, I have no issue with this at all.
I have one question. Did you come up with the Isaiah speller on your own, or did you steal that from someone? You don't have to say who you stole it from, but did you steal it, or is it your own? Literally
just thought of it as I was saying it.
That's mega. I would get to the local copywriter and get that against your name immediately. Neil, pick number 3.
Well, as you say, I think this year the draft starts at 2. Because we all know that Jonathan Taylor's going 1, and I will have no arguments if you go Austin Eckler. I wouldn't hate it if you decided, okay, I'm going to go with a wide receiver here. We're now at a situation, however, with the third pick where it could be seen as something of a gamble based on the last 2 years. But I'm still going to go with it because of the PPR, because of the uncertainty at the quarterback, and due to the fact that this team stinks. And the one true alpha on it is going to get all the touches, and I'm going to take Christian McCaffrey.
See, I think this is a really interesting pick because there's a chance that this makes or breaks your fantasy season in that league. If you pick CMC at 3 and you get 2020, it's bingo, or 2019, sorry. If you get 20 or 21, you're done. The issue with McCaffrey, I think, is injury at the moment, or has been the last couple of years. I think even when he's played, he's still got the points. It's just he hasn't been able to stay on the field. So it's a gamble. I think it falls down into that situation where I think this draft is is not a 0 RB draft right now. And you either take the elite ones or you're going to go wide receiver. So there's a question on whether you go for Cooper Kupp here. You didn't. Makes sense. Okay. And we move on to number 4, where I also won't take Cooper Kupp. And I think, based on me, I'm going to take the last running back who I think is going to get a lot of play. He has a better quarterback than he did last year, although, to be fair, last year his quarterback was a human statue. I'm going to take Najee Harris, running back, Pittsburgh Steelers.
Not the most efficient running back in the league, but volume trumps efficiency.
Correct.
So, as you say, we don't know who is going to be quarterback at the moment, but I think we can say that the offense will look slightly different. I wrote a piece for Number 5 this week regarding the identity of the Steelers' Week 1 quarterback. We'll come to that later. And yeah, I don't hate it. I think the 3 players who've gone ahead of him have more upside.
Yeah, agreed.
Because, for 2 of them, I think play on better offenses. And one of them, I think, is arguably going to get force-fed like Harris. So, yeah, do not hate it.
I think if you look, Harris will have more runs than Eckler and CMC, right? He won't have more runs than Taylor. He'll probably be 3rd in receptions if they all play all year. It then becomes a question of, touchdown luck, I guess. Mm-hmm. Number 5, Neil.
Well, I think it's time. It's some would say it's past time. So I will start the wide receiver run and I will take Cooper Kupp.
I think we discussed this last show when we were looking at top 10s and stuff. Even if there's a drop off from last season, he's still wide receiver 1, mate. Mm-hmm.
He can afford to lose 300 yards and 5 touchdowns and still from last year and would still be a top tier performer. And despite the changes that they've made on offense, Allen Robinson coming in, we saw that with Robert Woods and then with Odell Beckham, and he has the mind meld with Matthew Stafford. So the passing game goes through Stafford to go to Kupp. So as the first wide receiver off the board, I don't think it's a gamble at all.
No, I don't see it as a gamble personally either. I love it, actually. I'm going to take the second wide receiver off our board here. Last season, this would have been Devontae Adams, no brainer. I assume it's not for me. It's not an anti Derek Carr. It's more of a pro Aaron Rodgers / the offense he was in. On that note, I'm going to take a guy who's been in the league 2 years, is averaging over 90 catches and 1,500 yards, and 8 touchdowns. That's Justin Jefferson, a wide receiver for Minnesota Vikings.
Were you tempted to go with his former teammate, Jamar Chase?
Yes. What I would say on that is, if we use the Devontae Adams corollary, and what I mean by that is, who else are you throwing to in Minnesota? I think the drop-off in Minnesota compared to the share that I believe Mixon, T. Higgins, et al. Will get means I think that there's a better chance you get more production from Jefferson than you get from Chase. And I think we should just all quickly state again that Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase played together in college. College cornerbacks had to try and cover Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Unfair. Neil, number 7.
I'll take Jamar Chase.
we assume he just does the same as he did last year. Maybe a bit better. Like if I look at the Jefferson numbers, obviously there was an additional game, but he got 20 more receptions. He actually had 40 more targets, 200 yards more, and 3 more touchdowns. Are you expecting a kind of similar kind of situation for Chase?
We saw last year that there was a switch with the Bengals, that they started playing a bit faster once they knew that Burrow was okay, and when they were playing faster, they passed more.
Yeah.
So we're going to assume that if Burrow is healthy, and the Bengals' schedule is not an easy one, so they're not going to be able to rely and just lean on Joe Mixon. So I think they're going to have to fill the air with footballs, and I think that means that the alpha is going to get fed. T. Higgins can be a nice pickup at his ADP, but Jamar Chase is going to get enough to justify where he's going as well.
The slight concern I have with Chase is, do we expect him to get 13 touchdowns again? That is a lot. You probably say average for that kind of is the 8 that we talked about with Jefferson. That's a drop of 5. Now, he did get 1,400 yards. Could he get 1,500, 1,600 and 8 touchdowns, and you don't necessarily lose much? Then yeah, probably, and then you'd be like, okay, I'm okay with that. And I mean, at the end of the day, we're picking here at what number 7, so it's not something. If you can get that kind of value from your 7th pick, is interesting.
I think the Bengals do like to pass when they're in the red zone as well, so that obviously opens up the touchdown opportunities for Chase and Higgins, whereas it slightly dilutes Joe Mixon.
Yeah, this is now really interesting on where you go next. For those who are unaware, obviously, I think I'm probably gonna have to do it, and just I'm gonna make this the last Derrick Henry year. Go Derrick Henry at 8. At one point I was thinking, I don't think he's top 10, but I do look and think, do I want to pick, and then I'm just going to start naming names you're going to pick in a minute, Neil. Do I want to, there's still Cook and Mixon on the board, or do I start looking then at Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs? I don't know. So I've gone with Derrick Henry.
We know that if he is healthy, he monopolises the backfield. We know he gets all the carries, he gets all the goal line work. This offense is worse than it was last year, and last year it needed reinforcements, and all they've done is subtract.
Does it being worse help Henry, or is it worse and because that includes offensive line, it's just worse as in they won't move it as much?
Well, you can argue that last year the play action game, which is where Ryan Tannehill's made his money since he's been a Titan, the play action dropped without Derrick Henry because teams did not respect the run. Mm-hmm. Well, now it's like, and bear in mind that last year they had AJ Brown and the rotting corpse of Julio Jones. This year they've got Traylon Asthma Burks, I assume it's Asthma, and Austin Hooper, but you still have to respect the play action if Derrick Henry's there. So that makes the offense, it takes it back to what it wants to do. The fact that when they do throw it, it's to lesser players, that's tough titty on Ryan Tannehill, but that's not a problem, because we know that even though we know that play action just works, they're going to run the ball to get the play action off it, whereas now teams are going to have to respect that. And I can't see, if Derrick Henry is anywhere approaching full health, they're not going to timeshare him. So I don't think it's an illogical pick at this situation, especially if you think you've missed out on the big four, if you want to go, Taylor, Eckler, McCaffrey and Harris. And as I say, he may pick up a few extra receptions. We've said this every year. I don't believe it. I don't know why I said it. I'd say the main issue might be, his efficiency might come down. Well, so what? It's not going to be a timeshare. What you think they're going to take Derrick Henry off the field and give it to Hassan Haskins? Best of luck with that. Please come and play in my league.
Absolutely. Number 9, Neil.
At number 9, I'm going to go Stephon Diggs. Bit of a downlit year last year when everyone else in the offense seemed to get better. I bet on Diggs' talent that last year was a blip on his part, and the likes of Dawson Knox, Gabriel Davis, Manny Sanders, Isaiah McKenzie, that they're going to find their level, they're going to return or regress to their own mean, whereas Diggs is going to re-emerge as the focal point of the offense, and he's tethered to one of the top 2 most exciting and most prolific quarterbacks in the game.
I mean, it's... Stephon Diggs is a wonderful player to watch, right? My only fear is that he's not going to dominate the ball, and that's a good thing for the Buffalo Bills. You know, I want that kind of spread across the thing. I think he's brilliant, but I do wonder whether that's, you know, something we need to factor in.
Well, we do know that they're, to borrow a phrase from Evan Silver, they're going to pass the piss out of the ball.
Yes.
So this is one of those offenses that the wide receiver one is always going to get fed, and because of the high pass rate, Diggs is going to, you know, even if he doesn't need to have an obscene target share to be valuable, he can just have a slightly above average share for a number 1 wide receiver, and as long as he scores a few touchdowns as well, he's going to justify a first round pick.
Okay. Number 10. Last season, 292 attempts, 1,200 yards, and 13 touchdowns. I think you do raise a concern that the Cincinnati Bengals are playing a first place schedule rather than a fourth place. But I'm going to take Joe Mixon here.
I don't hate Mixon as a player. And I think the Bengals offense is one of those that we're going to want pieces of. You know, their main wide receiver and their leading running back is both going in the first round here. It's not unheard of. It's happened before. It'll happen again. So I don't hate it. Hopefully they might, again, we say this every year, they might throw him the occasional pass instead of trotting out Chris Evans or Samaje Perine in key situations. We are running out of, say, workhorse backs, because once you get into start getting into the second round and you look at the running backs available, you start looking and thinking, okay, there's competition in their own backfield, or the mentality of the team hurts them. So I think he's the last bell cow, or one of the last bell cows that you should be considering, and that makes him worthy of a first round pick.
Last pick for you, Neil.
Last pick for me, it's probably, again, I think it's the last running back who can lay claim to leading his team in backfield touches. I think everyone else here, they're going to face everyone after this is going to face competition, whether it's, you know, another running back, whether it's game flow, whether it's whether it's a link up between a quarterback and a wide receiver or a tight end. Now, I know there are question marks about him, because, you know, there always are, but I'm going to take Dalvin Cook.
I think they're a weird team, the Minnesota Vikings, right? Because they score points and move the ball consistently, but they just never look like they're going to win, right? Just kind of like weird, but...
And ideally, in fantasy, that's what we want.
Correct, right? There's teams who've always won, like the New England Patriots. You basically never really wanted anyone fantasy-wise. You might want Gronk, but then whether he was fit or not. And then there's teams like the Minnesota Vikings who you want loads on fantasy, but you probably don't think they're going to win. Last pick for me, Neil. I think it's tough. I'm going to take Devontae Adams here, because I think I'll regret it if I don't. 123 receptions last year, 1,550 yards and 11 touchdowns. Let's say it's not going to be that good this year. But if he gets 100 1,308, then that's probably worthy of a first round pick. So I'm going to take Adams.
It's not your usual wide receiver moves to new team situation, because we know he's got an established chemistry with Derek Carr. Obviously, It's been a few years since they played together, but seriously, Davante Adams is a much better player now than he was when Derek Carr was throwing the ball to him. So you can't tell me he can't elevate the player who's throwing him the ball. Davante Adams, as I say, it's great for him. That he's gone to a situation where he has this chemistry with Derek Carr. As you say, he's not going to get a 35% target share, because Darren Waller, if he's healthy, is going to get his. Hunter Renfrow showed that he can handle the work. I'm not saying that Renfrow's good. Hunter Renfrow is not the reason to not draft Davante Adams. That would be silly. But as I say, of the wide receivers we've taken here ahead of him, I think we are justified in that selection. Is Adams going to be top 5 wide receiver this year? I could see it. Is he going to be the wide receiver 1? I can't see it.
Yeah, I think there's a drop off, but I don't think it's a cliff. Like I'm just looking here at the kind of average draft positions, and like you pick Diggs, and just below Diggs is Deebo Samuel and Tyreek Hill. I have absolutely no idea what's going on with Deebo Samuel. And Tyreek Hill, like that signing and trade and whatever, has got like flashing alarm bells, this might not work, written all over it. So do I want to be involved in that when I can get Adams and think about who else we can pick later on, the likes of CeeDee Lamb? I'll be honest, I love AJ Brown. Keenan Allen, again, get some more San Diego love. You know, when you start thinking feistily about Kyle Pitts. But yeah, it's that kind of situation, right? I think Adams is the last one you go for. So plug for it. Let's recap, Neil.
Mm-hmm.
Neil, don't forget, number 1, Neil picked Jonathan Taylor. I picked Austin Eckler at 2. At 3, Neil picked CMC. 4, I picked Najee Harris. Neil picked Cooper Kupp at 5. I picked Justin Jefferson at 6. Neil picked Jamar Chase at 7. I plumped for Derrick Henry at 8. 9, Stephon Diggs. Joe Mixon for me at 10. Dalvin Cook 11. And finally, I picked Davante Adams at 12. As we said, before the end of the off-season, we will review and see if there was any changes we want to make.
We will.
On that note, Neil, let's get over to your interview with Andy Behrens. He talks the Bears. He talks, speaking of fantasy relevance, are the Lions more fantasy relevant than the Green Bay Packers? And also, a very interesting chat on, if he was the overlord of fantasy football, how would he change it? Hashtag death to PPR. On that note, let's get Andy on the line.
Joining me now on Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Duts, I have the pleasure, his first time around with us, it's Andy Behrens of Yahoo Fantasy, also the president and enforcer of the FSWA. Andy, thank you very much for giving some time to chat to me this charming evening.
Oh, Neil, the pleasure is all mine. It's great to talk to you. We don't get enough opportunities like this.
No, I say we follow each other. I say on the Twitter and take the mickey out of Denny Carter, which I think everyone does. But you know, this is the first time we've actually spoke. So,
how nice were those 2 or 3 days when Denny finally logged off? Like the I don't know. There was I think it was an Elon related tweet. I don't know. Denny was really fed up with something in life, and he was like legitimately not on Twitter for 2 or 3 days, and like the markets went up. Twitter was such a cordial, happy place, people treating each other respectfully, and then Denny logged back on and all went to shit again.
See, it was a couple of years ago when he was on one of his Twitter hiatuses. He was on our pod, and we told him that the Green Bay Packers had announced that the one player that they couldn't dream of making a Super Bowl run without was Mason Crosby. And I told him that, and I've never triggered anyone as much as Denny was. I think he came back from his sabbatical early just because we'd given him the ammunition to fire off a series of kicker takes. Well, let's say we could talk about Denny all day, but I'm sure he'd like that. But one thing to say that I didn't mention at the start in your introduction, I need to get better at introductions, is that you are a Chicago Bears sufferer.
It's fine with me if you don't throw that out there. That's like a mark of shame.
I can appreciate that. The big, obviously, news, the Bears this year, obviously new coaching staff and whatnot, and new general manager with the same initials as the last one. It's like a bit suspicious. Bit suspicious, that one. But at the start of this month,
we got a new general manager.
Yeah, it's that one. Yeah, was it like what was the athletic piece? Was what the Washington? No, so I'm not Dan Snyder. I'm Schnan Dider. It's like a Simpsons sketch, but it could be true. Ryan Poles, I believe that's his name, a likely story, said at the start of this month that, what was the exact quote? I think, I believe in Justin Fields and the whole staff believe in Justin Fields. So bearing in mind that the wide receiver depth chart at the moment around Justin Fields is Byron Donut Pringle, Velus Jones, who might be my dad, I'm not sure yet given his age, Equanimous St. Brown, Daz Newsome, Tajay Sharp. What kind of receiver core would they be putting out there?
Let's not forget David Moore and Dante Pettis.
Oh, of course, Dante Pettis, of course.
They've collected all of your worst fantasy decisions
over
the last 3 or 4 years.
This the question is, like, if they didn't believe in Justin Fields, how bad would this wide receiver core really be?
Yeah, it's obviously a frustrating offseason, and clearly they unloaded some pieces that do not necessarily fit the Justin Fields timeline, right? I certainly wasn't upset that they moved on from Mac, or in the way that they moved on from Mac. That was fine with me. I knew going into the draft that they didn't have a premium draft pick at any point. They didn't pick in the first round. They have needs literally everywhere. So it was always likely that fans were going to, they didn't have infinite picks, didn't pick until round 2, so you're going to be disappointed, right? Like, they're not going to get any marquee guy. Like, you've seen a month of pre-draft shows, like, mocking the first round. Well, you're not going to get any of those guys. You're not going to know that, like, the average Bears fan is just simply not going to know the name of whoever they're taking in the first round, second round, or in the second round, third round. So, like, part of me wants to complain that they didn't make a move up the board, perhaps, for Sky Moore, for one of the premier wide receivers. Sky Moore was the guy who became a pet player of mine in the pre-draft process. And so, like, you fixate on guys like that, and they don't have a building block receiver who necessarily fits Fields' timeline other than Darnell Mooney, who's fine. Like, Darnell Mooney's fine. I think he's the kind of player that the great teams have in a supporting role, right? I don't think he's the alpha. We're going to build every good thing we do in the passing game around Darnell Mooney. I don't think he's necessarily that guy, but he's really good, and I'm happy to have him on my real life team. So this is a long way of saying that we knew we were going to be disappointed in the draft because you couldn't possibly address everything that needed to be addressed. A lot of Bears fans were fired up that it's defensive backs that they took with their first couple picks. Well, that was a massive team weakness. So, like, the nice thing about being as bad as they look on paper is that no matter what you do and no matter what moves you make, they are definitely addressing needs. So they did that. That's fine. The receiving core is not even the aspect around Justin Fields that bothers me the most. It's really they might have the worst offensive line in football. I'm only saying might because there's always lines and there's always linemen who surprise us every year. Maybe there's a surprise here somewhere, but, like, if I had to bet it, I would say that at the end of the season they will almost certainly have a bottom 3 offensive line, which was clearly a problem last year. Young quarterback who isn't necessarily going to have the fastest processor in the game, having only played however many games it is so far in his NFL career. It's just really bad. Like, they had to use their draft picks on some offensive linemen, which they did. They took a few of them, like round 5, round 6, round 7. That's great, except those guys are going to have to play. Like, some of those guys are going to have to play, like, a lot as rookies, and they're like, everybody passed on them 4 times. So it's going to It's going to be bad. I don't know a positive way to spin this. We also don't like the coaching staff might be okay. Like I don't know. I haven't disliked anything I've heard necessarily, but these aren't guys, for better or worse, these aren't guys who have like head coaching experience, and the OC isn't a guy who's been an OC before, which of course is fine, but I can't judge anything yet, you know? So I'm trying to be, it's hard to be optimistic as a Bears fan, but I'm trying to be optimistic with regard to the coaching staff. I know that it can't be as bad as it was, you know, mid-season last year when you know, they just threw Justin Fields into a situation where they still had him trying to run an offense that was designed more or less around the limits of Andy Dalton, right? And you know, but Justin Fields all of a sudden is starting games, and they won't throw a screen pass. There weren't any designed runs. Like there wasn't any acknowledgement that Justin Fields had a different set of skills from Andy Dalton. So that was a huge disappointment. I'm sure that the offense this year will be tailored more to what Fields does well. I'm actually a believer in Justin Fields. My only hope for this season, basically, as we sit here, you know, there's still a few. I'm sorry, I'm giving you such a long answer to this question, but I have many thoughts on the Bears. There's so many pieces that could still move around the NFL, right? Like, and I don't know that the Bears will be players for any of them, but there's a bunch of receivers that could still change teams, right? The Seattle receivers haven't gone anywhere. That seems weird. Maybe Michael Thomas can move. Maybe Debo can still move, right? Like, there's still pieces that could move around. I don't expect the Bears to have to make any sort of splash play with regard to any of those guys. But, like, even if they don't, like we saw a bunch from Fields last year that I thought was really encouraging. I thought in particular, again, it was a bad defense, but the game that he had against Pittsburgh, was that a Monday nighter? It was an island game, I think. The game that he had against Pittsburgh, I think Fields made 3 or 4 of the best throws that we saw from any rookie quarterback last year. And I don't think you can find a game that was played by any rookie QB last year that was substantially better than the one that Fields put on tape against Pittsburgh. Like, it was great. Again, not the best defense in the league, but he really made some throws that are pretty special. I basically just hope that this year doesn't set him back, doesn't ruin him, right? I hope that he doesn't come out of this thing shell-shocked because he gets sacked 55 times and, you know, drives are getting killed by receivers who can't get open and receivers who can't hold on to passes. And you know, I hope they put a scheme around him. I hope they put him in a scheme that suits some of the things that he does really well. I'm trying to be optimistic, man, but it's not always easy.
I mean, it's on paper, the NFC North looks like one of those divisions that the last few years have looked one way, but now it looks like it's going to look different. I mean, because obviously you've got Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. I know Rodgers is still there, but this Packers team just looks different because there's some bloke who used to be there who's not anymore. The Vikings have their, you know, another. They've gone.
Obviously, you're talking about Equanimous St. Brown.
Of course, yeah. Well, how you can start a franchise without someone with 4 initials when you try and abbreviate it? You know, it's just a dangerous game to play, and it just seems that. You know, I mean, I've not travelled extensively to America, but Chicago's one of the few cities I've been to. I have a great deal of affection for the city. Timmy O'Toole's is a great place to go on New Year's Eve, for example.
Oh, yeah.
And it just pains me that when I sit down and I say to myself with a straight face, the Lions are going to be better before the Bears. It's a weird place to be in.
It is a wild transitional moment for the division, and I would actually say, obviously, the Packers. Certainly on paper, they have Aaron Rodgers. They're going to be a better team than the Bears. I think, honestly, right at this moment, I would be, if I were a Packers fan, I would be more frustrated with my team than I am as a Bears fan. This is hard. Like, they're great, but they've, I mean, this is, I think it's I just counted it up. I think it's 241 wide receiver targets from last year that are gone. Between MVS and Devontae Adams and St. Brown had a smattering of them. Not that he necessarily deserved them, but he had a few. But like 240, and the only move that they've made to date, again, they could still be players from Metcalf or Lockett or someone like that. I thought they would sign Jarvis Landry. They didn't. They could still be players for someone. They've obviously tried to get involved in the trade discussions for A.J. Brown, probably other players, probably Debo. But like they're replacing, again, 240 vacated targets. They draft a rookie from North Dakota State, caught like 40-some passes last year. Super athletic, but, I mean, that just screams learning curve, right? Like, that's going to take some time. Building rapport with Aaron Rodgers obviously takes time. He's not the most patient man when it comes to on-field production and doing what's expected of you. We know that he loves Allen Lazard, but Allen Lazard, he's huge, doesn't have great hands. He's not the separator that Devontae Adams is. Like, Devontae Adams wasn't a role. Devontae Adams is a uniquely talented receiver who's going to thrive in Vegas. It's just a huge loss that they haven't replaced or really even addressed, I think, in a meaningful way. And you don't have that many MVP level seasons left from Aaron Rodgers. He's not a young quarterback anymore. He's as good as anybody in the game at his position, arguably as good as anybody who's ever played it. But you don't have that many more seasons, and we can't waste one. So I would be really anxious about my receiving core. I feel great about the defense. Defense looks great. All kinds of things look great. But like Aaron Jones might lead that team in receiving this year. Maybe that's fine. But it's not the receiving core I want for a team that has disappointed relative to expectations over the last couple of years. Obviously, they've been great in regular season. Can't get to the Super Bowl. No real shame in that. But I'd be pretty uptight if I were a Packers fan right now. Minnesota, it's like the same cast that they're running it back with, but we got a new coaching staff. That's kind of fun. So who knows? And then Detroit is like the one legitimately fun team in the division. No matter the record last year, they were super fun at the end of the season. Really, really fun. We got a bunch of young, talented players who are all sort of on the same timeline. That's kind of fun. They add Williams to that mix. He's gonna be great eventually. So it's like I actually love the gamble that they took on DJ. Not even much of a gamble. It wasn't much of a contract. The DJ Chark deal. I think he's a really nice fit. Just a really fun ascending team. Hard not to enjoy the head coach. So yeah, it is a weird time to be thinking that by far the most entertaining team in that division could very well be the Detroit Lions. But they certainly deserve it. They've waited long enough.
I was on a podcast last week and I don't try and make hot takes because when you've got this nasal voice, they don't sound that impressive anyway. But the two that I said that people remembered was one. I said that TJ Hawkinson will be a better fantasy performer than Mark Andrews this year. I had reasons. I wasn't just saying this to say it. And also I said that Jared Goff would finish with more fantasy points than Aaron Rodgers.
Especially that second one, like the first one might take an injury, might take some missed games. The second one is like, it's hard to rank Aaron Rodgers right now. Like, it's just hard. Like, I think I have him. In fact, I can bring up my quarterback ranks right now. That's great on a podcast when somebody is looking for something online. People love that. But I think I've got Rodgers like 14. I have him QB 14, and that's just respect for Aaron Rodgers, like having him that high. I know that sounds really low. I know that like not having Aaron Rodgers like in your top 8, top 10 sounds like pure disrespect. But honestly, there's so many guys that I want to put above Rodgers, and I just can't do it because he's the 2-time MVP. He's as good as it gets. He's just throwing to some dudes, and that is going to be a huge problem. Goff, at least, like we're not asking Goff to like. When you throw that hot take out there about Jared Goff, you're not actually asking him to do something that he hasn't done before. Like, he's had a big year. He was briefly in an MVP conversation. Now, we see that a lot with quarterbacks who don't even necessarily pan out. But like, Jared Goff has been good for extended periods of time. It is entirely possible that he does that with a lot of this comes down to the right people staying healthy, obviously, for Detroit. But that is a really talented group of receivers. Obviously, they've got a wonderful back who's capable. Like for a minute, was on pace for like 90 receptions last year. If Hawkinson can stay healthy, he can be an 80 catch guy. Like, yeah, there's a path for Jared Goff to finish with 28 touchdowns, 4,800 passing yards. Like, is Aaron Rodgers going to do that? I don't know. Probably not with this receiving core.
And that's the great thing about fantasy is we don't need Jared Goff to be good. We just need to be productive.
Right.
Because it's. I have tried to learn to grind the tape, as it were, and I can't. I haven't got a clue what I'm looking at. But if I know what bad looks like because I've seen bad, but if someone, if you just look at the numbers, it's like, and say this is the one thing that I speak to some people who don't get fantasy football. It's like, yeah, but he's not very good. It's like, yeah, but I don't care. You don't get points but you don't necessarily get points for them being good. You just get points for them dumping it off.
Now it comes up all the time, and quarterback is really not to go on a tangent about fantasy scoring, but quarterback is really the one spot that we definitively get wrong, right? Like whoever the founders were that came up with the original rules for quarterback scoring, they blew it, right? Like they got so many things right, but at quarterback, we don't really punish turnovers. Like it doesn't, like, usually interceptions are an afterthought. Accuracy is a total afterthought. Most leagues don't account for completions, incompletions, anything like that. You might get like -1, -2 for an interception. It just doesn't, like, if you just throw 600 times, you're going to be a good fantasy quarterback. Like, that's basically where we're at. You end up with the Jameis Winston season where he's throwing 30 interceptions and it doesn't matter. He's like a top 5, top 6 quarterback. Get the Blake Bortles. Blake Bortles had a season in which he led the league in interceptions, fumbles, and sacks taken. Led the league in all 3 of those things and was like the QB4. So, like, we just get a lot of really important stuff wrong at quarterback. And so you're right. What is even the point of watching tape at the quarterback position when none of this is going to matter? Like, we just need a guy who's going to run for 600 yards and or a guy who's going to throw it 700 times.
We've had a good run recently of rookies coming in and being productive straight away. As you say, obviously the Bears could do with some of that at various positions. Is there a particular rookie that you find yourself thinking, I've got to have them in every team I'm drafting, whatever the format?
I think it's pretty. In fact, I've got a couple of slow drafts going right now. One of which was a dynasty, began as a dynasty rookie draft, and it spiraled into something else. But I had the second pick there, and so I assumed I wasn't getting Breece Hall. But in fact, Drake London went 1 there. I think those two are the very clear 1 and 2. I don't have them in that order. I think Breece Hall is Breece Hall is tough for me because I don't think he's like young Zeke Elliott necessarily. I don't think he's that guy. But I do think he's really good, and I do think he can play every down right away. And obviously, Michael Carter is going to have a role for the Jets. That's like he was too good last year not to. Sorry if you hear my dog barking in the background. But Breece Hall is really good, and he's sort of built for the role, can do everything. And like foundational backs like that, which is what he has the potential to be, those guys you just got to take early. Those guys you just got to prioritize. I also think that London is somebody who was an absolute target hog in college, and he's stepping into a situation where it's just him and Kyle Pitts, really. Couple of big dudes on the outside for Mariota, and it's probably not going to be a high volume passing offense, but they may not necessarily get to choose that. They might not be in great, game flow situations all of the time. So they may end up having to throw the ball a little bit more than they want to. Those two are just going to dominate targets. He's really good. I don't think he's various other people have made the point that it's not necessary. It's like damning with faint praise to be called a contested catch guy at the collegiate level, right? Because we really want people who separate with ease at the collegiate level. Because if you find yourself in too many contested catch scenarios as a college player, like, life is going to be hard in the pros. But London is huge. He was a contested catch guy. He's got all the physical gifts that you'd want. If he's healthy, I think he's going to be great as well. I
think the contested catch tag is because it's like the wide receiver version of the look how many game-winning fourth quarter comebacks he's had. When you say, yeah, but if he was quarterback for the first 3 quarters, he's probably the reason why he had to come back. I'll finish just a quick question. Obviously, as I say, you are the president of the FSWA. You've been a fantasy judge on Yahoo at times as well. If there was, and you've touched on there how our makers, as it were, got quarterback wrong. If there was one rule that you would make standard in every league that isn't now, maybe some quirky leagues have it, what would it be?
Oh, that's a really good question, and I'm embarrassed at how much time I spent thinking about fantasy scoring settings and things like that. I would ditch. I feel pretty strongly about this. I would ditch PPR in favor of point per first down. And I've sussed this out over long periods of time. I think people generally, first of all, I think one thing that we like to experience as we like watch the players who are on our fantasy teams is we want to know instantaneously if the thing that they did is good for fantasy scoring, right? And so I get it. Like, you enjoy seeing your guy catch a pass, and like that benefits you. The problem is that's just one way of transferring possession of the football, and it doesn't necessarily translate to anything meaningful on field, right? First downs do. Like a first down is a meaningful event for a team, and it's a big deal in the flow of a game, and I think everybody can appreciate as they're watching it. There's just too many problems for me that are presented by PPR. I won't list them all out, but I absolutely hate every time there's like a catch for 1 yard for no yard. Like, a catch for no gain has the same value as a 10-yard run. That drives me crazy. It drives me absolutely crazy. Like, football is a game of territory and scoring. And so I actually think that's one of the things that, like, the original founders of fantasy football, when they wrote these rules, they did get that right. They didn't add too many flourishes, right? Like, they understood that it is about territory and it is about scoring, and it is not about a lot of other things at the end of the day. It is certainly not about, the value of a handoff versus a reception. We may someday get to the point where we can give bonus points for like, next gen stats might get so good where we like really care if a ball is caught 20 plus yards downfield. Fine, you get a bonus point for that or something like that. But I'm just not I'm not that impressed with guys who catch passes at the line of scrimmage and go down quickly and get the equivalent of, like, again, a 10-yard run. I hate that stuff.
See, he's not here. And I know at the moment he's driving up to Liverpool. But Mainsy, my co-host, as soon as you said the words point per first down, his ears would have pricked up. He would have felt a disturbance in the force, because seriously, he hates PPR. He despises it for that reason, the reason you've given. That,
oh, my guy.
It's, oh, look, 15 receptions for 20 yards, great. But point per first down, he's like, no, that's actually meaningful. So he's...
Yeah, this is the thing. People hit me all the time with this idea that, like, just because I don't like PPR that doesn't mean, like, there's too many people who only see PPR and standard scoring as, like, the only two options, and if I don't like PPR, it must mean that I want everything just to be like touchdowns only or something like that. But I like all kinds of crazy scoring quirks. I just happen to hate that one. I get why we settled on it. I totally do, because, like, if you played fantasy like I did in the mid 90s, the early 2000s, first two rounds are just every starting running back. That's all it was. It was, the game got boring if you played it for like 3 years, because it just came down to draft position, and somebody's going to end up with Emmitt Smith and somebody else is going to end up with Deuce Staley, but everybody's taking running backs. And this did balance it out. Problem is, the game itself solved this problem, right? The NFL itself solved this problem. Now there's like last year 3 guys saw 300 touches. 4 guys. That's it. Antonio Gibson had 300 on the nose. That's it. Only 4. It used to be a whole bunch of guys, right? Like, workload is just distributed differently. We don't get those high volume running backs anymore, and there's a ton of receivers who are catching 60 passes. So I don't know. The game has changed, and I feel like we should ditch PPR.
Well, I think, there's no more emphatic way we can bring this to a close. Andy, thank you very much. Where can people find you and find all your work?
Total pleasure to talk to you, man. Really enjoy your stuff. Really enjoy interacting with you all the time on social too. It's been great. Like, I complain about Twitter all the time, but there are a handful of people that are just really fun to go back and forth with, and you're definitely one of them. People can find me on Twitter at Andy Behrens. They can listen to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Forecast on, I don't know, wherever podcasts are sold, and they can always read us on Yahoo Sports.
Thanks very much, Andy.
Thanks, man.
And that was the brilliant Andy Behrens there, and I'm glad he has joined the revolution and wants points per first down rather than the garbage that is points per reception, Neil.
Judging by how quickly he came up with his answer, I don't think he joined the revolution. I think he's been leading it.
I do too, and that's even more awesome. Neil, that's it for this week's show. Fantastic stuff as always. Where can people catch you before we're back again in probably a couple of weeks?
Before we're back again, you can follow me on Twitter at N13. This week, as I teased, I wrote a bit on the betting market for the Steelers' Week 1 quarterback. So will it be the rookie Kenny Pickett? Will it be Mitchell Trubisky? Will it be Mason Rudolph? You read, you find out, you decide.
If it's Flip and Mason Rudolph, I think Pittsburgh should be baned.
We'll just say this little tease that I did mention in the article. Kenny Pickett is one of only 6 quarterbacks taken by the Pittsburgh Steelers in the first round of the draft since 1953. 2 of the 6 are in the Hall of Fame. One of them is going to the Hall of Fame, whether we like it or not. So absolutely no pressure, Kenny.
Since I last did a pod, I dusted off the old typewriter, Neil, and started the draft recap for the NFC East. I was lukewarm on the Dallas Cowboys, especially early doors. I was straight hot fire on the Philadelphia Eagles. No jinx, promise. You have to say, Neil, you get a first round pick and you get a 24-year-old wide receiver who's already, gone for thousands of yards in the NFL. You're going to take it. So two more to go. One of them I'm looking forward to, and one of them is the Washington Commuters. Stole that from Mina Kimes. Although may not be commuting, as the Virginia governor in his quite rightfully said, I ain't paying for none of Dan Snyder's shizzle. And I think he's right.
A wise man.
A wise man indeed. That is it for this week. Brilliant to be back. Stay safe, everyone. And we will be back ASAP. These top guys are out.